forward, and it's great to talk to an audience as sophisticated and as well informed as this, because that's not normally the situation in Washington. And I want to thank Bumper for his kind words. I've really enjoyed working with FFF over the years, and Bumper has helped protect me against my moderate tendencies. Because there were a number of times where I'm thinking, maybe Bush has got a point, but then I talk to Bumper and I say, yeah, well, maybe he is a rascal. When I was sitting down a couple of days ago preparing this speech, I realized I had a simple choice. The first choice would be to take the high road, and the second choice would be to talk about the TSA. I'm curious, did anybody here have a bad experience flying in? Okay, well, bad news. I mean, the feds have got this under surveillance, and you're going to have a hell of a lot worse time getting home. Now, there was an article by the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank, and Heritage was saying that the only change as far as civil liberties since 9/11 is that people have to take off their shoes when they go to the airport. Well, I don't know what kind of shoes that guy wears, but the fact is, thanks to 9/11 and thanks to the federal failure, by the Federal Aviation Administration, the FBI, the CIA, the National Security Agency, thanks to their failure to stop the hijackers, we now have an army of occupation of 45,000 federal agents at these airports. And the feds seem to change the rules each month as far as what you can and cannot do when you're traveling within the U.S. Toothpaste has come in for a lot of grief lately. If it's a large tube, then, you're a suspected terrorist. The rules on shoes, I mean, it's some months you have to take off your shoes, some not. I guess one bright side of that is it's made a lot easier for the TSA to hire new agents, because there are a lot of shoe perverts out there, who really like, here's some nice ones, I mean, you got to check your shoes and make sure they're dry when they come through those things there. So, and TSA is always making up new rules. I mean, TSA is pulling one rabbit out of a hat after another. Back in August, September 2003, there was a bombing in some Chechen terrorists apparently blew up a Russian airplane, and there wasn't really good evidence as far as how the terrorists, blew it up. But the TSA assumed that the terrorists were female and that they had hidden a bomb in their brassiere. So TSA proceeds to treat every, ample female in the country traveling as if she was carrying breast bombs. And, there was just a huge scandal. It was something which just kind of started overnight. There was no warning. There was no public discussion. There was, there was no one to tell the TSA, hey, you boneheads are out of your minds. It didn't matter, because the TSA had the authority. The TSA makes its, the TSA makes the rules, it enforces them, and it judges all the violators. And this is exactly the type of paradigm that James Madison warned against as the epitome of tyranny. Something that the TSA has started to do a couple of years ago is impose attitude fines of up to $1,500. I mean, TSA did not announce this either. But if someone is going through the TSA line, it doesn't matter if they've been delayed for half an hour and missed their flight, or if some TSA person has given them grief and the person talks back to them, the TSA can fine you up to $1,500. And often a person has no notice of this until they get a letter in the mail, a few weeks or a month or two later. I assume this is a program to make the government safe from sarcasm. But this is the type of thing that has multiplied since 9/11. You have people making up rules, not telling Americans about them, and simply, trying to make Americans grovel at the feet of federal agents. And there has been a consistent message from parts of Washington and parts of Congress and the Bush administration that groveling will make us safe. But it hasn't worked for people in the past in other countries, and it won't work for Americans now. Something which is really striking to me about how the war on terror has changed America, it has brought out the latent authoritarianism in this country, more so than even I expected. I mean, if you think back a few years ago to how the Dixie Chicks were vilified for just a casual comment that their lead singer made at a concert in England, if you look at how many conservatives have been calling for the New York Times to be prosecuted for treason, simply because the New York Times has had some stories about federal law breaking. If you look at some of the prominent conservative columnists who are calling for the creation of concentration camps in this country for Muslims or Arabs, and you know, these are the one person that did this is a best-selling author. These are things that would have been very difficult to imagine even a few years ago. And to see where the trend lines are going in this country, it's very, very concerning. But a lot of the news media tells us that the war on terror is not a threat to you unless you're a terrorist, or unless you're a terrorist suspect. And that second category, you know, it kind of, you know, blossoms. Looking back to what the feds did after 9/11, the feds rounded up more than 1,200 people and locked them up, and in many cases violated their rights, held them in violation of court orders. And the only thing a person needed to do to be considered a suspected terrorist was to be a Muslim or an Arab who was an illegal immigrant who was encountered by FBI agents in New York or New Jersey. That was what it meant to be a suspected terrorist. Arab students were locked up as suspected terrorists for working at a pizza parlor in violation of their student visa. A Pakistani immigrant was jailed as a suspected terrorist because his neighbors called him in because he failed to cut the grass and he hung his underwear out on the fence. That was pretty suspicious. There were some FBI agents, you know, the FBI was under a lot of pressure to bring in people for questioning. Some FBI agents were told to look in phone books to find the names of Arabs and Muslims who could be interrogated. These are the standards the government was using after 9/11. Now, and it's gotten worse since then in some ways. The Homeland Security Department in May 2003 urged local police departments to view critics of the war on terror as potential terrorists. The feds told local lawmen to be on alert for potential suicide bombers. And the feds said that the suicide bombers could be recognized by things such as having a pale face from a recent shaving of a beard. Or for instance, a person might appear to be in a trance, or their eyes might appear to be vigilant and focused. And the feds warned that suicide bombers might be someone whose clothing is out of sync with the weather. You know, I've heard that from quite a few people who flew in here and didn't realize that, you know, it's summer here in D.C. The feds also warned that if someone's clothing is loose, that could be a sign of a suicide bomber. You know, I don't know how many college campuses these folks have visited recently, but, you know, and perhaps to ensure that there will never be a shortage of terrorists, the feds warned that another telltale warning sign is that someone for whom waiting in a grocery store line becomes intolerable. You know, and these are the experts at Homeland Security. This is what they're telling 18,000 federal, local, and state law enforcement agencies around the country. And this is some of the stuff that's leaked out. You know, it's possible there's much more comical stuff we haven't heard about yet. But this is, you know, this is what these folks are getting away with. It's interesting to see some of the other definitions that federal agencies have used here. The Pentagon is doing a lot of surveillance inside the U.S. now. This is in violation of federal law. They've been caught breaking the law a number of times, and each time they've explained, well, it wasn't intentional.